Chapter 1, The Hook, midnight to 0:45, the ninth tenant never moved in. Not because the apartment was taken. Not because they changed their mind. Because by the time they arrived to sign the lease, 8 people had already died inside that building, and no one had told them. But to understand why, you need to know what came first. In this video, we're going to walk through the true folklore behind Japan's most feared kind of property, the Jiko Bukken. Then we'll look at what residents actually reported before they disappeared. And at the end, I'll show you the one detail about apartment 9 that nobody in the building's history ever explained. Stay with me. This one gets worse the longer you listen. Chapter 2, Jiko Bukken, Japan's Cursed Apartments, 0:45 to 2:30. In Japan, there is a legal category of property that most real estate agents are required to disclose before you sign anything. It is called Jiko Bukken, which translates, roughly, to stigmatized property. These are apartments and houses where someone has died, by suicide, by homicide, or in circumstances that were never fully explained. Japanese law says agents must tell prospective tenants about deaths that occurred within roughly 3 years, but the rules are complicated, and what gets told and what gets buried are two very different things. Some landlords rent Jiko Bukken at prices 40 or 50% below market rate. Young workers, students, people with nowhere else to go, they take those apartments. They tell themselves they don't believe in ghosts. Most of the time, nothing happens. Most of the time. The building at the center of this story sits in a mid-sized Japanese city. I'm not naming it. The people who lived nearby, and the one surviving family member who described these events years later, all asked that no specific location be attached to what happened. The building had 4 floors. 3 units per floor. 12 apartments total. 9 of them were occupied during the period this story covers. And something was working its way through those 9 units, one by one, in order. Chapter 3, the first 8, 2:30 to 5 o'clock, we don't have complete records. What we have are second-hand accounts, a local newspaper archive that ran one brief story before going silent on the subject, and the testimony of a former neighbor who moved out in the mid-1990s. The first tenant to die was in Unit 1. Ground floor. She was an elderly woman, living alone. She passed away quietly, no signs of anything unusual. The building manager noted she had stopped collecting her mail. The second death came 8 months later. Unit 2. A man in his 40s. He had complained to neighbors in the weeks before about hearing sounds from the floor above, but Unit 5, directly above him, was empty at the time. Unit 3, the following year. A young woman. She left a note that said only 4 words before the text became illegible. Her neighbors said she had been cheerful the week before she died. By the time Units 4 and 5 had cycled through new tenants and new deaths, the building had begun to develop a reputation locally. Not widely known. Not discussed openly. But whispered. The deaths were never identical. Never clearly connected. A fall. An illness that moved too fast. One person found in the bath. One who simply did not come home from work and was later found in the river 2 kilometers away, with no explanation for how they got there. But each time, the pattern held. The deaths moved in sequence, Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, methodical, unhurried. Like something was collecting. If this is the kind of story that pulls you under, the slow building kind, the kind that makes you look twice at an ordinary door, consider subscribing. There are more of these waiting for you. Unit 6, 7, 8. By Unit 8, the local reputation was serious enough that the building manager had trouble finding new tenants at all. He stopped listing the units through standard agencies. He started placing handwritten cards in convenience stores and laundromats. No photos. No history. Just a price, far below anything else in the city, and a phone number. And what they found after Unit 8 is even stranger than everything that came before it. Chapter 4, the building changes, 5 to 7 o'clock. After the death in Unit 8, something shifted in the building itself. Residents in Units 10, 11, and 12, the units that had so far been untouched, began complaining about the same thing simultaneously. Cold spots. Not drafts. Not poor insulation. Cold in the center of a room, moving. One resident in Unit 10 kept a journal. Her entries, shared with the former neighbor years later, describe a presence she called the one who was waiting. She wrote that it stood near her front door every night between 2 and 3 in the morning. She wrote that it never entered. That it knocked, one knock, always one, and then was silent. She moved out before anything happened to her. She was one of the few. The building manager, by this point, had stopped maintaining the property. Trash accumulated in the stairwells. The exterior lights failed and were not replaced. Tenants in the occupied units started leaving their doors cracked open at night because, and multiple people said this independently, being sealed inside felt worse than the alternative. The former neighbor who gave this account describes visiting the building once at this stage, to check on a friend in Unit 12. She says she rang the buzzer for Unit 12 and waited. While she waited, she looked at the buzzer panel. All 12 units were labeled. But Unit 9, the only unit that had never been occupied, had a different kind of label. The others were printed. Standard. Unit 9's label was handwritten. And the handwriting, she said, did not look like any handwriting she had seen from the building manager. She didn't go inside that day. Chapter 5, Unit 9, 7 to 9 o'clock. Here's what is documented about Unit 9. It was never listed for rent at the time the building was built. There is no record of any tenant ever being matched to it. There is no record of it being used for storage, for the building manager's personal use, for anything. On paper, it simply sat empty from the day the building opened. But the former neighbor, and 2 other people who accessed the building in its final years, all describe the same thing about Unit 9. It was warm. Not room temperature. Warm. Noticeably, uncomfortably warm. Even in winter. Even when every other unit in the building was cold. One person described pressing their ear to the door. They said they heard breathing. Slow, regular, unhurried. They did not open the door. No one ever opened that door who then spoke about what was inside. The building was eventually condemned. Not because of the deaths, the official reason was structural deterioration, deferred maintenance, code violations that had accumulated over years of neglect. Demolition was scheduled on a Tuesday in November. The crew arrived at 7 in the morning. When they reached the 4th floor and began removing the interior doors to the individual units, the foreman's account, given to local officials as part of a workplace incident report, states that Unit 9 presented an anomaly. The door to Unit 9 was locked from the inside. Not locked in the sense that no key was available. Locked in the sense that the bolt had been thrown from inside the apartment, the kind of lock that requires a person inside the room to engage it. The unit had been empty, officially, since the building was constructed. No one had a key that fit it. They removed the door by force. The incident report does not describe what was inside. The space where a description would be written is filled with a single phrase, "See attached." There is no attachment. Chapter 6, What the Folklore Says, 9 to 10:30. Japan has an old concept, older than modern ghost stories, older than the classification of haunted properties, for buildings that are considered to hold something. Not haunted in the Western sense. Not simply a place where someone died and left an echo. But a place that has become a vessel. A container. A structure that something has chosen to inhabit not because of a death, but because it found a room that was never properly filled. In this interpretation, the empty unit, the 9th apartment, was not a consequence of the deaths. It was the origin. Something had taken residence in Unit 9 before any tenant arrived. The sequence of deaths, the orderly, patient progression through Units 1 through 8, was not a haunting spreading from person to person. It was a collection. The ninth space was always going to be kept. Kept warm. Kept waiting. Kept for whatever comes next. Chapter 7, Closing and Tease, 10:30 to 11:30, the building was demolished. The lot sat empty for several years. A different structure was eventually built there. Whether it still stands, and what has happened within it, is not something I can confirm. What I can tell you is that the original incident report, the one with the missing attachment, was filed away in a municipal archive, unremarked upon, until a researcher working on a completely unrelated project found it almost 2 decades later. The researcher noted the missing attachment in their own notes. They submitted a request for the full file. The archive responded that no additional pages were on record. But they also noted something unusual, something they included almost as an afterthought in their response. The file had been accessed twice before the researcher's request. Both access dates were recent. Both access requests had been submitted anonymously. Neither of the requests specified which part of the file they were looking for. Both times, whatever they were looking for, they seemed to have found it. If this story reached something in you, the feeling that some spaces are not empty even when they look it, there are more waiting. Subscribe, and the next one will find you. Next time, we're going into a tunnel under a mountain in Nagano that was sealed in 1987 following an incident that was never publicly described, and the workers who sealed it refused to sign their names to the closure report. Some of them left Japan entirely shortly afterward. You'll want to be there for that one.